Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Mark Anthony Thomas with us today. He's the president and CEO at Greater Baltimore Community. He's studied at MIT Sloan School of Management. Mark's an interesting guy. It's not his first company. He's worked at the city of Los Angeles, city limits as well, New York. So a bunch of cool organizations, and I'm just eager to learn more about him today. This podcast is presented to you by podfire.com. If you want to start your own podcast, can help you do that with AI, can almost fully be automated to generate leads, connections, and even sponsorships. If you want to learn how to do that, you can go to podfire.com. We have a free ebook and a masterclass for you on the website. Mark, welcome to the pond. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Great. So I'm Mark Anthony Thomas. I basically work with helping major American markets transform their economies. And I worked, as you mentioned, in Los Angeles and New York, Pittsburgh, and now Baltimore. And so Baltimore is obviously a major market. It has a lot of complexities, like a lot of American cities. And so on a day-to-day basis, I'm working to make our economy more attractive for people to invest, solve major problems, and build a place that people want to live and work.
Right. In Baltimore, tell me a bit more about it. I thought that it was like one of the most violent city in the U.S. last time I checked. So tell me about its economy and how it's doing as a city.
Yeah. So we've historically had issues around public safety, uh, but in the last few years, there's actually been a ton of progress as far as um, reductions in crime, reductions and things that affect public safety. Right. Overall, though, our city and our region are pretty dynamic, and so you see growth in manufacturing. You see the intersection between AI and life sciences, really creating a ton of new startups and innovation. And then we have a thriving creative economy from concerts to film to just artists that are transforming the place. And the role I play is looking at where there are opportunities to keep advancing things like that.
Right. And what's the difference between Pittsburgh or New York or LA, all cities that you've worked directly or indirectly at?
You know what it is? I mean, New York is so big. I mean, it's the largest urban economy in the world. So when you're looking at how do you transform it, it already has such an established identity. And so you're always looking there at new places to add, whether it's smart cities or cybersecurity, where you're trying to create new jobs and new subsectors of the economy. It's also like the East Coast port for international tech. So pretty much any entrepreneur in Europe or in Israel or now Asia is really looking at New York as a landing pad. I mean, LA is obviously a different vibe. It's much more centered around the creative economy and entertainment. And so even the tech and innovation is adjacent to that field. You do have space tech and things like that. Pittsburgh is the robotics capital of the world. And you see a ton of automation technologies from cars that are being automated to um, machinery that's helping improve how energy is extracted. So each American city, when you actually get to know them, they have their own flavor. And from the roles that I've had, your job is to continue to make sure that movement happens.
Right. And how do you help them precisely to develop economically? Because it's a huge machine. Most of the time, there's a lot of bureaucracy. So, how do you step through all of that and actually make an impact?
Yeah, so a lot of it is actually a mixture of private sector investments and collaboration with government and public sector leaders, right? And so you need capital, you need branding, you need initial seed investments to catalyze things that then create a broader ecosystem. So, say if you're trying to build, for example, a clean tech hub, then you actually need to put the machinery in place so that startups or new growth in those areas flourish. There's a huge, obviously, intersection between tech transfer and innovation at great universities. And so all of those things, they're not easy things. They're really sophisticated infrastructure that you have to put in place. But there are a lot of good examples across now the world where cities have reinvented themselves.
Right. And how do you get paid? Is it like consulting contracts? And how do you get these contracts? How do you actually outreach to cities and get these clients?
No, so our organizations are regional entities that have been around for a long time. So my organization has been around 70 years, and it's funded primarily through businesses that people know, right? From Under Armour, T. Rowe Price, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, and they pull their support toward the collective impact that only a regional or an economic entity can make.
Right. Can you be more precise here? Like, you get paid on results? That what you're saying, or is it like a more of a nonprofit style, or?
Yeah, so some of these are nonprofits, right? So and they exist whether literally if you're in London, if you're in Paris, if you're in Berlin, Montreal, like we all have a version of what I do. And
Got
so
it.
people, yeah, so people who are in the entrepreneurial space, they generally know the economic organization for that market. If you're a major company and you're looking to set up a new office or expand your operations, you're generally working in sync with our organizations. It's also a pretty developed field for people who do business expansion work.
Right. And precisely how do you attract like that much economic activity? How do you attract new startups, for example, and entrepreneurship potential? Is it people from the US? Is it people that are already there? Is it immigrants that you attract? Like, how do you do it?
Oh yeah, it's a mix of all of those strategies, right? So there's certain markets I used in the U.S. like San Francisco, New York, and Boston have historically been the startup destinations for international entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But now, especially after the pandemic, you see Miami, Atlanta, Austin, Texas. These are places where you see a lot of immigrant entrepreneurs. The actual, I would say, standard business expansion work, um, like that happens kind of all throughout the country. So if you're in manufacturing, if you're creating something that's industrial, like they're looking for different markets for different reasons, right? So but I think in totality, each market has a certain volume of activity they want to see on an annual basis. And then just to circle back, that's how you judge on the ability to bring business and jobs to each market.
Right. And if we can we create like a Silicon Valley out of Baltimore, or is that like unrealistic in terms of expectations, or we should pick a different niche, like Pittsburgh chose robotics, for example?
Yeah. So assuming that there's been a lot of intentionality to try to diversify investment so that Silicon Valley doesn't have such a lion's share of it. But every year they still maintain their competitive edge against every major market in America. I think it's going to take some time and almost like a cultural shift of tech in the venture capital space for that to change.
Right. And what's your plan for this year with Baltimore? What do you have on your agenda? What do you have on your calendar to actually make things move forward this year? What are your precise objectives?
Yeah, so we have a 10-year plan that we produced last year that looked at literally all the big opportunity areas. I'm fairly new in my role still. I've been here 2 years, and I completed a merger of another organization, so we centralized our work. We're also launching a brand for the Baltimore region that will amplify pretty much all the things. So literally, people start to have a better understanding of what types of investments are happening here in Baltimore. Um, Other stuff that a lot of people are working on, but it's really acute here, is we have a huge stock of vacant houses that really are just a product of post-industrialism. And so a lot, you have related issues around public safety and arsons that are then impacted by that. And so those are some of the big areas that I'm focused on this year.
Right. And do you feel that economic development's the number one cure to fixing crime, or is
Yeah,
it more complex
yeah,
than that?
100%. Yeah, and I think assume that if people who have that hypothesis do the work I do. Yeah, and so people resort to a life of crime because there's no opportunity that to do other things, at least for poor communities, right? So if you actually create jobs and bring wealth, then you see the impact of that type of opportunity.
Right, and also isn't it like an education thing? Like, for example, if I'm a young guy in the hood and I see this gangster with like a fancy car and bling, I instantly want to be that guy. Vs the rich entrepreneur that is more low key, that won't be in my sight, you know.
Yeah,
How do you, yeah, how do you actually reshape education and almost cultures in these places to actually show people that they can make more money than choosing not choosing a life of crime. For example, being an entrepreneur, I make way more than drug dealers, and I don't get to spend time in jail. So, but I'm also way less present in front of these people, right? I do put out content out there, but will they actually view it? Not really. Will they view the guy passing in front of them in a fancy Lambo Urus? Yes. So I'm curious on how one would actually fix that.
yeah. I think it comes down to exposure, right? So I mean, I grew up poor, so I've seen plenty of my friends and family members who resort to lives of crime, right? And that is very different than if you are in a community where you see or have access to opportunities. And I had scholarships. I had good people who I sought out for mentorship. And then there's a little bit of embedding in people's minds that you can actually be whatever you want to be, and the world is your canvas. To me, trying to do that in mass is the big opportunity.
And what's your take on all the defunding that's happening right now? Is it done too much at a random level and just not helping? Is it that DEI initiatives most of the time don't even calculate the outcome? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I'll say so. Those are two separate and related things, right? So I think the strategy for how things have been defunded has created a lot of uncertainty, and so I'm not a fan just in working in a business sector of anything that disrupts some clarity on what people can expect. Um, in some way, the DEI framing, a lot of that work has been with us for a long time, right? Like as I mentioned, being a poor kid, like there were people investing in intentional communities that I was a part of to give us opportunities, because whether we accept it or not, the world is not fair for people. And so my hope, and I think we'll do this as well, is that people get back to the work itself, that there is intentionality in creating opportunities for all people, without necessarily the framing of DEI that people took and it made it somewhat polarizing. But you've had companies investing in historically black colleges, underinvested communities, rural communities need a lot of support through technology and broadband and access as well. So there's a case for equity in a lot of different pockets of America that touch a lot of different kind of people.
Right. And related to that, like capitalism, it follows the laws of evolution, which I think why it's the default system that we adapted as a humanity. It is working, but some pieces of it are not working, right? So, how do you actually give a shot? We all want to give a shot to the not an underdog that will beat us, right? But like someone that we can help, for example, our son or daughters, for example, we want to give them a better life. I think that comes in natural as human. And me, any founders that I see, I want to give them a shot. I know they'll be good for the economy. I know that they'll be good for the world. I know that they'll survive in this AI future. but also at the same time, I think a bunch of old people don't want to be replaced, right, by this new generation, or they're just like too obsessed about competition and the survival of the fittest. So how do you help someone succeed? How do you help people that grew up poor to actually have a shot at making it without disrupting this competitive balance?
Yeah, I mean the beautiful thing with economic growth is you're creating a bigger pie, right? And when you look at some of the inequities in America, you have large swaths of the population who just are not even contributing to the economy because they were had restricted opportunities or been in generational situations where it's hard to break. Like my personal story is such a rare story to go from where I was to where I've gotten to, and from a pure business case, having more people who have greater access to innovate, solve world problems, contribute to our economy is a good thing. But you can create a scenario where people think you're splitting a pie. But when you look at all the acceleration in science, innovation, economics in the last century, it's because we've brought people into the workforce and actually given people great access to opportunity.
And you just justify most of your success story to the scholarships and external help, or actually what's inside you and how you were sort of built?
I think it's both. I do think I had a moment when I first went to so I went to University of Georgia for undergrad, and I remember for the first time learning classes that other freshmen had taken in high school that gave them a better GPA than I did, and feeling some kind of way about that, right? And so I say, if the world was structured fair, then you could just say, okay, all of us had the right opportunities. But I felt like I had to break through and almost navigate a labyrinth of barriers to get to a place to be successful. And what has happened, at least in the last 10 years, is greater awareness of those structural challenges. But
Right.
yeah, it takes a lot, frankly, if you're in a bad school or poor or come from a family where they don't know how to guide you the right way, to then even have the foresight for the opportunities that people who've been given these things have.
Right.
Uh, like you mentioned, like, going to business school at MIT, you don't go to that environment and you're unlimited in how you think about the world. But that environment is like an exclusive environment.
Yes, for sure. And for someone of my background to understand that, it's always hard because for me, my default state of reality is having a shot, right? I never didn't have a shot. My dad was an entrepreneur, middle upper class, almost in Canada.
Okay.
Canada, which is a great country, right, for uh, the social nest, quote unquote. And I think I attribute most of my success to this stability, right? Because I was a little cowboy when I was young, and I could have easily gone to jail. Um, and then first mentor found me, right, like in my career, and he was like such an eccentric, odd guy, that like serial entrepreneur, and he taught me that basically anything was possible. So I was fortunate to have that. It's always hard to project a reality that you haven't lived, you know. One of my ways to be more aware of that is talking to folks like you, but also using ChatGPT to tell me stories, first account stories, right, of people that have made it and gone out of the hood, for example, or really like bad social fabrics, right? So it's always helpful to think in these terms and fill your brain with that type of information. Now, you mentioned inequality. Um, I'm an AI power user, and yeah, I'm making a lot of money using AI nowadays and using all these kinds of systems, and it's only getting faster.
Yeah.
And I have a super brain as well, so it's like almost an unfair advantage. And in the market, we use unfair advantage positively, right? And the term moat positively, but at the other end, it makes me think and it's like, how the fuck are people gonna make it? You know, like competing with people like me that have a bunch of systems and AIs that work in the background and are constantly producing an outcome. So I'm kind of worried about the inequalities and that will be created about with AI. Have you studied that topic, and what is your
Yeah,
take on it?
yeah, it's a hot topic in our field, right? So, and even folks like McKinsey and the big universities all say, "Oh, the AI revolution is going to destroy a lot of jobs," and it will. But the flip side is it does force us to innovate in how we think about what a job is. And I'm a fan of never stopping efficiencies from being a barrier to what humanity needs, right? And so AI will make science better. It will improve everything from transportation safety to our ability to live longer. And so I think we need to lean as much into it as possible and ensure that we're building a workforce that actually is more empowered using the technology innovation.
And will it create more poor and more wealth? Will it create more separation, this technology, or will
No,
it level the
I
playing
think at
field?
the tail end of this, it should create higher quality jobs, right? Like at the end of the day, if there's a lower tier job that can then be done by AI, it creates an opportunity for us to retrain or reskill people so they can actually do more higher quality work. At least at a high level, that's the viewpoint I have. And so I more think we need to prepare people for an inevitable future versus trying to inhibit innovation.
You mentioned Under Armours and such brands when we started talking. What is your take on corporations? Are these folks taking more than they give? And do you think they will scale in this AI future?
Yeah, no, I mean, part of what I work with are companies that are investing in AI, investing in innovation. I mean, they're using um, all forms of deep tech and so many different facets. I mean, you mentioned Under Armour, like all the fashion and tech that you see is pretty cool stuff. Um, but then everything from food to science to transportation, it is remarkable when you're immersed in all the innovation that's underway.
Right. Mark, thank you so much for being on today. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so check out gbc.org. Obviously, we cover the Baltimore market, um, but we have some major institutions that have done some great stuff. They can follow me online, like either just Google my name or um, search for me. And I tend to communicate about technology and that intersection between economic development and the work, so people understand where are places that are doing cool stuff. But thanks for having me on. It's been good.
My pleasure. That was Mark Anthony Thomas and